Okay, good evening and welcome everybody. I am Trillian Atwood, the Director of Programs and Visitor Experience here at the Jewish Museum of Maryland. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to tonight's presentation, How to be Jewish in Space, with Rabbi Dr. Eli Yogev. So this evening we are very, very pleased to be welcoming back Rabbi Yogev again to speak on another topic related to space. Throughout this month of July, we've been marking the 51st anniversary of the moon landing and preparing for our upcoming exhibit, Jews in Space. Originally scheduled to open in May, it's now opening in September. Please join us again next week for a special sneak preview of that exhibit. So that'll be Tuesday night at 7 p.m. You'll be hearing from me and our Deputy Director, Tracy Videcker. We'll put the link for that event in the chat box at the close of the program if you'd like to register. Also, thanks to technology, you can go back in time and revisit Rabbi Yogev's presentation from last week. And so again, at the end of the program, we'll pop a link into the chat box, and so you can have a chance to listen to the prior presentation, Are We Alone and Does It Matter? So now to our speaker this evening, Rabbi Dr. Eli Yogev, Associate Rabbi at Beth Tefillah Congregation, lectures widely on topics in Jewish thought and spirituality. Over the past year, his talks have included titles such as Angels and Demons in Jewish Tradition and Is There an Afterlife? Rabbi Yogev completed his doctoral dissertation at Bar-Ilan University in Jewish Mysticism and Hasidism. In his free time, Rabbi Yogev enjoys beatboxing, photography, meditation, and anything having to do with animals. So Rabbi Yogev, welcome to our virtual JMM.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. We shared that I'm a big fan of animals. I'm somewhat of a fan of aliens too. I just haven't met any. But I'm a fan of the topic, and hopefully we'll share with you today a lot on that topic. We have a lot of important things in store for us tonight. Let me just, give me a moment. Okay. We have a lot of fun things in store for us tonight. We are taking this to the next level here. Last week we talked a little bit more about the theoretical. We talked about what it means to us if we discovered life on other planets. This week, we're going to talk about some more practical, I mean, outer space isn't super practical for a lot of people today, but more of a practical direction we're going to take when it comes to outer space. And we're going to address some actual halachic questions, which Jewish law questions that were asked of rabbis when it comes to outer space. My belief, and I'm going to share this with you as you move forward with the PowerPoint, is that there are some really deep questions that are addressed in each part of this lecture. And so if you're asking yourself, what am I doing? It's the end of the week. There's so many issues in the world. I need this rabbi to tell me about what's going on in outer space. Like, what's happening? I do believe, I sometimes think to myself that thought too. But in truth, there's some really deep, extremely deep concepts we're going to be addressing in this short lecture. And so in that sense, I think it'll be worth your while. And also sometimes it's good to take a break and explore different things that are out of this world, because this world sometimes can be overwhelming. So if you have any comments, put them in the chat section. I have a sermon that I put together on Jewish law and outer space. We're going to link to that at the end of this lecture. There you can find a lot of the sourcing for what I'm sharing today. And without further ado, let's get going. So I'm going to share with you my screen and we'll get going. Okay, we're going to get out of this slide. Okay. So being Jewish in outer space. This is our lecture. And here are some of the questions we're going to be addressing. Again, this is going to be a fun summer evening event, but we're also going to address some serious questions. We're going to break up the lecture into 3 parts. Space food, because everyone loves to talk about food. So we're going to talk about Jewish food in outer space. And is space food actual food? So we're going to try to get to the definition of what food is in the eyes of Jewish law. These are like the underlying questions. The yellow parts here are the underlying deeper questions. And I think this is a powerful question here. Okay, now we're going to talk about the topic of alien conversion. Okay, so this also sounds like a crazy topic. Like, what is it? On a day-to-day basis, are aliens trying to convert? But there's a really deep message there in relation to how do you define a human being? We know that human beings can convert to Judaism from other religions. Is an alien a human? And if not, why not? What makes a human a human? So that's going to be discussion there. And lastly, this is like the main thrust of the lecture, and this is what I wrote that sermon on that will be available for you. Halacha in outer space. So let's say halacha, we're going to talk about what that means in a second. It's Jewish law. But when you go to outer space, if someone goes to outer space, do the laws apply there? They're outside of the Earth's stratosphere. Maybe the Torah and the mitzvot were just given to us humans on Earth. Maybe they don't apply outside of the Earth. And if they do, how do you do it? And there are many complications when it comes to that. So I'll just share one of them with you before we get going. So there's a joke that I found on the internet. I say that I found on the internet, but I made it up. That covers me if it's a bad joke. So the joke is, what's the Jewish astronaut's favorite song? Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. Why is that? Because as an astronaut is orbiting the Earth, the astronaut will see sunrise and sunset every 90 minutes. It'll be a full day of sunrise and sunset. And therefore, it makes it very complicated in terms of Jewish law, because the astronauts, they ask themselves, I know that Shabbos comes in every 6 sunrises and sunsets. So after that 6 intervals of 90 minutes, do I have to observe the Sabbath? And then another time, and then another time? What about praying? You have to pray 3 times a day, and 3 times within the interval of a sunrise and a sunset. So sunrise, sunset, 3 prayers, 90 minutes. Sunrise, sunset. So complicated questions. I see someone actually is observant Jew, and they want to go to outer space. What do they do? Do they go by the sunrise, the sunset? Do they go by other parameters? That'll be the crux of the discussion. That will be part of that, the main part of that discussion. All right, so before we go, here are a few terms, just for those who aren't familiar with these terms. Mitzvah is a commandment. I'm going to mention these throughout. Mitzvot are commandments, plural. Halacha means Jewish law. Psak, I might mention this from time to time, is a ruling. And a bracha is a blessing. I'm going to try to offer the English versions of these, but as you go along, if I say mitzvahs, you're going to know I'm talking about the commandments. And halacha is Jewish law. Halacha means to walk. And so Jewish law is all about walking in the ways of God. So it's halacha. So the first topic we're going to talk about is space food. Okay, so people are interested in this. They ask so we're going to, at the end of each section, we'll pause for questions. Okay, so feel free to write them in the chat section, and then we'll address them, or any other comments you have. So the first topic is space food. Space food. And one question that people ask is astronaut food kosher? So is astronaut food kosher? So it depends. Depends. There's some of the food, some of it's kosher, but it's no. From what I read, no astronaut, and someone can correct me, but no astronaut has gone to space with a fully kosher meal, because it's just a large amount for a fully kosher diet, with everything being fully kosher, in the sense that certified kosher, meaning perhaps the ingredients are all kosher, but it doesn't have the certification of a rabbi who checked that it all passed inspection, but it could be kosher in itself. Food does not need a rabbi to be kosher. I know that's like a common misconception. A food can be kosher in itself. You have a cucumber, that's kosher, but oftentimes you need a rabbi to certify that he has seen all the ingredients in their kosher. So the food itself could be kosher, but it's hard to get such large quantities of space food to be certified kosher. So Ilan Ramon, when he flew into space, Columbia mission, he asked for kosher food. He felt himself an ambassador of Judaism and of the Jewish people, and he did a lot of Jewish things. We're gonna mention him later on. And one of the things was he wanted to bring Jewish food to outer space. So he got permission, from what I read, to bring some Jewish food along with him, and that's what he did. So it depends on if it's certified. It's just like any other food that you'll find. If it's certified kosher, it's for kosher. the ingredients are kosher and it's cooked and it's prepared in a kosher place, it could be technically kosher, but we oftentimes go by the certification. So that's one question in terms of astronaut food. You have food on the right, on the picture on the right side here, you have packaged food, and food can be packaged in different ways. When it comes to making a blessing over these foods, it would depend on how they appear. If you have food that looks like it's normal, like it appears how it normally appears to us when it's not in the form of space food, it would have its normal blessing. But if it's mashed up or pureed, the blessing might change. It might be more of a generic blessing, which is called shehakol ni'abivaro, for those who know what the blessings are. I'm not going to go too deep into that. I'm just going to talk about one blessing going forward. But it all depends on how it looks, and that's the same thing for our laws on earth. When you're making a blessing over mashed potatoes, it might be a different blessing than the potato itself, because Jews, when they take a food, observant Jews, they will make a blessing over it. You make a blessing over it in relation to what the food is and how it appears. So if the food appears in its normal form, like a potato, you make the normal blessing over it. But if it's mashed potato, make a different blessing. And so that could be the same case for space food. Okay, so the question I want to address here, and this goes to how does Jewish law define food? It's an interesting discussion here. And those who feel like this is kind of like nerdy at this point, I feel like it's kind of nerdy too. And we're going to be out of the nerdiness pretty soon. But this feels a little nerdy in the sense that it's like kind of like a theoretical discussion. But it is a little bit interesting in the sense that we're defining what food is in Jewish law. But in a moment, we'll get to like a little bit more meaty things. But I wanted to address this because people asked about this. So the blessing you make over food that grows from the ground is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam boreh pri ha'adama. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who creates fruit from the ground. We must bless over foods before we eat them. So food that comes from the ground, the sages decreed that the blessing over it is, blessed are you, Lord our God, who creates food from the ground. So you see a few food items here, fruit, vegetables that come from the ground. So make a blessing, fruit that comes from the ground. Now the question is, let's say, stop sharing. Let's say you take, let's say we find an inhabitable planet and we're able to engineer a situation where we can plant our carrots on Mars or some other planet. Let's say we have that kind of situation. Now it doesn't grow in our Adamah, in our land, in our earth. It grows on Mars's earth, if we want to call that earth. It grows in the earth of Mars. So the question is, would you make the blessing? Let's say you're able to grow carrots. You're on Mars. You planted a carrot. You came back later on, and Elon Musk's travel package. It's a fully paid week on Mars. You head there. You're like, I want to taste these Martian carrots. You take a carrot. You pick it up. You're an observant Jew. You say, what blessing do I make? And that's the kind of the question that's at hand here. And it's a little bit deeper than that because it goes back to another topic in Jewish law, which is what blessings do you make on hydroponics? Okay, so each time I'm going to take you to a different field a little bit. But you have hydroponics here on the left. Hydroponics are food that doesn't grow in the ground. You have vegetables that can grow in water. And they grow. So what blessing do you make over them? Do you make, blessed are you, Lord our God, who created the fruit of the earth? It's not in the earth. It's in water. Or perhaps you make a blessing over the type of vegetable that usually grows in the earth. So that probably will be the answer to this question. When you're on Mars and you have this Martian here, or not, this astronaut who's watering the vegetation on Mars, it will probably go back to that question. If you make, there's some opinions that say you don't make the original blessing over the vegetable when it grows in a hydroponic state, because it doesn't grow from the earth. So you make a general blessing over. You want to make blessed are you God who creates fruit from the earth. Others say that you do, and based on that opinion, perhaps you would make a blessing who creates fruit from the earth in outer space if you were able to plant the earth's vegetables in outer space. Another interesting question, and and then we're going to get out of nerd category. But another interesting question is, let's say we discover food on some planet. Okay, so you're flying through you're orbiting through the galaxies at some long time in the future, and you happen across a candy bar. You have some planet that grows candy bars. I'm exaggerating. Let's say you're able to find some sort of food in the Milky Way. I was actually nerdy too. But let's say you find some sort of food in outer space. You're able to eat it. What blessing do you make over that? Would that be, it's not an Earth's vegetable that's planted in outer space, but it's from outer space itself. So I was thinking about this. This is my last nerdy comment. So I was thinking about this. There's someone wrote Mars bars, creative. I have a feeling this is going to start a chat war as to which candies we can name that are connected to the planets. But anyway, so there's discussion as to what Jews blessed on the manna in the desert. There's discussion like this in our tradition. Some say that they didn't make "Blessed are you, Lord of God." The manna came down from the heavens to earth in the desert. So they made a blessing. What blessing they make over it? It's not from the earth. So some commentators say that we make "Motzi lechem min hashamayim." God provided us bread from the heavens. So maybe you make something like that over space food. God, blessed are you, Lord our God, who created the fruit from the heavens. I don't know. Perhaps you make that. We'll deal with that when we get there. Maybe just make the regular blessing because it is from the ground. It is from the ground. I don't know. Maybe you would just make shakol, which is a general blessing which covers everything, and it admits to God. It highlights how God provides everything we need. So those would maybe be the three options. One would be that you make some sort of other blessing, creates fruit from the heavens, which I doubt we'll be saying that. Or you make the normal blessing, or you make shakol, the general blessing, that everything is made in God's, everything is made through God's handiwork. But I think the main idea here is that we do bless on everything, and any discovery that we make in outer space, I think we would not deny the fact that it's God's creation. The question is what we do with it and how we thank God for it. All right, that's the end of that discussion. Were there any questions there, Trillian, worth addressing?
No, I think you got the one question that really was related to that section already. So I think we are good to keep going. Thank you.
Okay, let's keep going. All right. Okay, now here's this question about alien conversion. So let's say there's all these depictions of aliens in movies are coming to take over the world. But let's say we have this really pious alien that comes to the world, and it comes to the earth and says, you know what, I love your Torah, I love Judaism, I want to convert. Could we convert an alien? Now, it sounds like a funny question, but it has actually a really deep lesson. So I'm going to, let's do a little poll here. One moment. 1 second. So what makes us human? Let's do a poll. We have, we're going to offer a poll in the chat section and also post it into Facebook. And I'll just describe what the poll is. Can you imagine a situation in which you would define the following as human? A dog, a robot, or an alien? So let me just, before you jump to saying no, let's say you have a robot who's very smart, who can pass tests that define them as being on par or even higher than humans in intelligence. Perhaps you would define them as a human. Perhaps they get to a point where they're able to think for themselves. What about aliens? What if the alien comes to the earth with intelligence, free will? What if you have a dog who's so human-like? Every time you come in the house, it makes you feel even better than your human spouse. Maybe that's a human. I don't know. So what do you think? Let's see what people here will answer. By the way, shout out to Mitzi, who is in this picture here. That's my friend's dog, who we call a puppy, even though it's nine years old. So it's a very human-like puppy, so I put it on here. All right, so Trillian, were there any, was there feedback on this?
So we've got a few responses coming in from the polling. I'll give everyone just a couple more seconds. If there's anyone else that'd like to vote, please do so now. And we'll just give it one more second to see if we've got anything coming in from Facebook. No, nothing on Facebook right now.
Okay.
So, okay, I'm going to end our poll.
All right, what are the results?
So, can you imagine a situation in which you would define a dog as human? 75% said no, 25% you said yes. Can you imagine a situation in which you would define a robot as human? That's pushing a 50-50 split, but slightly more on the side of no. And can you imagine a situation in which you would define an alien as human? And that got 75% said yes to that one. So it looks like we're ready to embrace the alien community.
Okay. All right, that's kind of surprising. I thought it would be less. But let's see where that is going to take us. So you're not alone. Here are some, I was thinking about this. Which of the following makes us human? So think about it. Like if you're defining, this is important in terms of our definitions of who we are. What makes us unique? What makes us human? Is it the fact that we have a unique soul? Is the fact that humans have intellect and animals don't have the same intellect? Is the fact that we have speech, free will? Is it our biology? Is the fact that we were born from other humans? Is it how we look? Or is it just the sum of all these parts? Or is it perhaps not due to anything? It's just we define ourselves as humans. Perhaps if we define ourselves as aliens or aliens define themselves as humans, that would count. And maybe there's some other definition. So if you think about aliens, aliens might fit a lot of these categories, and then you might be in that definition of asking, could that? In my head, if a dog wanted to convert, I wouldn't convert the dog. Sorry, Mitzi or any other dog. But if an alien wanted to convert to Judaism, first we have to see if it's defined as a human. If it is, then perhaps it could convert to Judaism. Let's say it looked like a human. I have here a picture of an alien that looks like a human on the bottom right corner. Let's say it looks like a human. Let's say it speaks like a human. Let's say it has intellect, free will. The only thing is that it wasn't born from a human. Okay, but let's say it has a soul. You feel like it has a human soul? It feels like it has a human soul. It defines itself as a human. So that would be the question. Is there something? This is the main question. Is there something unique to us as humans that were born from human beings that makes us human? What is it? What is that component? So classically, in this top right corner, we have here a source that's often brought throughout my seminary days, which talks about what makes humans unique in relation to animals. It's brought from Genesis 2, verse 7. It says that God created humans and breathed and blew into their nostrils a breath or a soul of life. And Onkelos, who's one of our famous commentators, says, what is that soul, that unique soul of a human being? That they can speak. So let's say you have a robot experience. Let's say you have an alien that can speak. Maybe they would be in the definition of human. So that's kind of like the general discussion when it comes to this. And I'll just show you a few texts that deal with this, and then we'll move on to the main crux of our discussion here. But this is also like an interesting piece here. So there's discussion as to there's a lot of cases of golems in Jewish tradition, and this is a course within itself. Maybe one day the museum will have some sort of exhibition on this, and I'd be happy to join and speak on that too. But just so anybody asks, I never created a golem. Somebody asked me that once, among all the other interesting questions I get asked. So there's a text, and this discussion of a golem goes back to how do you define a human? And so I just want to touch on this briefly and then move on. So there's a case in the Talmud of Rava, and I would just read the yellow part. Rava, as Talmudic sage, created a golem. He did it through incantations, divine incantations. And Rava sent this creation before Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera would speak to him, but the golem would not reply. So at that point, Rabbi Zera said, "You were created by one of the members of the group. Return to your dust." Rava killed the golem. So some commentators see from this, first off, it's interesting that you could create this golem, And there are accounts of this in Jewish lore. How accurate or true it is, that's a topic for another discussion. But this idea that Rabbi Zeir will create a golem, which is a being that moves around, that can function like a human being. The only thing that's different is that it can't speak. A golem traditionally can't speak. So some commentators, and this is Chacham Tzvi, says golems are not humans because Chacham Tzvi said golems are not humans, not because of the speech, but because this golem, Rabbi Zeir killed Rava killed the golem because the golem was not born from a woman. And if it's not born from a woman, you can kill it. So here we get the definition from the Chacham Tzvi of what a human is. A human is, or at least in terms of the laws of murder, someone that was created and born from another human. So there's a verse that says, "Shofech dam hadam ba'adam." Whoever spilled the blood of a person within a person. So we see here that a person was born from within a person, they're defined as a person. That's his definition. Now, it's a really interesting source that I came across, and I'm happy I came across it, which is it's Rav Gershon Henoch Leiner, who happened to be one of the rabbis I focused on in my dissertation. He talks about he says no, it's not true. He says, listen, the Chacham Tzvi, listen, I have a problem with your interpretation, and I'll just read this out to you. I'll present this to you, and we'll go to the next topic. But he says, listen, I have a problem with your interpretation. There was one human once upon a time who was not created from another human. Who was that? Adam. Adam Arishon, the first human. So would you say we'd be able to kill Adam? He says, that can't work. So he says the reason why Rava killed the golem was because Rava knew that was not a high level golem. A golem that can't speak is not a human. But he says something really amazing here. And this goes back to the definition of who is a human. It's really amazing. He goes, however, in truth, this is in the bottom of the text here. In truth, the bottom paragraph. In truth, if the truly righteous one without sin wishes and creates a world, a golem, the laws of humans would be attributed to it in all senses. In terms of laws of impurity, one could even have them join as a tenth for a minion. It would be considered as if God created himself. He's basically saying, and he goes to the paragraph before that, he says, the golem lacked the faculty of speech. And that's why it wasn't a human. Meaning what makes us human is our faculty of speech. That golem couldn't speak. So it wasn't defined as a human. But if that golem could speak, it would be a golem 2.0. It would be considered a human, and we could even bring it in to a minion. What side of the mechitza, that's a whole different question. Whatever. But what's powerful about that discussion is just how do you define what makes us unique as humans? Is it that we were born from a woman? Is it that we have the unique faculty of speech? If we have the unique faculty of speech, we might share that with the golem, and we might share that with the robot, and we might share that maybe even in a more enhanced way with aliens. So that's kind of like that's the parameters of how you define a human. And whether you would define an alien as a human if they can convert. I think on the ground, we probably would put all these together and say you have to be born by a woman. That's what I would probably do. You have to be born from a human, and you have to have unique faculties the human have in order to be defined as a human, in order to be converted. So I'm sorry to all the extraterrestrial friends who are watching this. I don't know if I'd be able to convert you right now. Okay. We're done that topic. Are there any comments?
So I think from what I'm seeing on the questions, I think you've probably covered a lot of them. The one thing that is popping up in both the Q&A and the chat, and it is taking us slightly off subject, but I think being as it's come up a couple times, I should put it to you. There's questions around how this concept that you're talking about could be implied to babies who are conceived either just through in vitro or taking us further down the line, if it were possible for a baby to be conceived and carried to term in some kind of mechanical womb through artificial insemination.
Yeah, so
where does that leave us? Which I think might be a massive, massive subject for a program in and of itself.
I will just say that there, as in everything Jewish, there's like a debate around that. Do you go by the donor or by the carrier? There's a debate when it comes to that. And from what I recall, we would go, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, I'm not mistaken, he says we are strict and go by both if we can, and try to, so we try to align with both of those in a strict way, take both of them into account. But there's a debate in Jewish law. It's actually a fascinating one. I actually have a recording on it, so if you want, I can forward the recording when it comes. It's like a 10-minute recording. Yeah,
I think something like that would be great. I think we've got a couple more questions that are...
Whoever asked that, you're definitely on track. You're thinking the right way, for sure.
We've got a few different things coming in along those same lines, but I'm thinking maybe if we carry on with the next section to make sure we get through everything, and we can maybe revisit this again.
So that's whoever's thinking that way, you're thinking the right way. So Yashar Koach, as they say. Great job. All right, so let's move on to this last part. And I'm happy to, if you want to get in touch with me too, I'm happy to talk with you about that or send you material on that topic. I'll put my email at the end of this presentation into the chat section. All right. So here we are. We are at the pinnacle of our lecture. I love this part of this lecture because it's just really interesting, and it has a lot of components here. So halacha in outer space. Is there not, the first, this is going to be comprised of two parts. Is there an obligation to perform mitzvot, commandments, outside of the Earth's stratosphere? And the second topic will be, if so, how do we do it? So this actually is a question. When it comes to, this question became practical a bit ago around the time when we first landed on the moon. Rabbis were asked questions when it comes to observing Judaism in outer space. So Rabbi Ben Sion Führer, I put this in red just because he has a negative opinion on this in terms of the application of the commandments in outer space. He basically says, let me just show this. He basically says you can't, the commandments don't apply in outer space. So let's say you're an observant Jew, and once upon a time you weren't observant and used to eat cheeseburgers. Okay, you're fully observant in all the ways cheeseburgers are on kosher. You used to eat them and you miss them, so you become an astronaut and you're flying in outer space. The second you leave the Earth's stratosphere, the mitzvah, the commandments are no longer applicable. Perhaps you could eat cheeseburgers in outer space. But he has a reason for saying this, and there's a really deep point of debate here that I think is at play. So I want to share that with you. And it goes to the purpose of the commandments. So Ben Sion Führer says that he brings a verse, a fascinating verse, which you can see on the bottom left side of the screen. It says, "These are the statutes and judgments." You have to read it like this. It's like a yeshiva way of reading things. "These are the statutes and judgments you shall take care to do all the days that you live upon the earth." Okay? It says all the commandments, the judgments and the statutes, all the commandments that we do, we have to do them all the days you live upon the earth. He says from here we see that if it were not on the earth, they might not be applicable. He says they're not applicable. He brings an example. He says you're not allowed to build if you have a temple in Jerusalem, you're not allowed to build another altar outside the temple. It's considered a forbidden altar. So based on that, he says it's clear here that if you build a temple in outer space, that would be a forbidden altar. He says also with regards to Shabbat. Shabbat was defined based on the 7 days of creation on earth. Who knows? All the definitions outside of earth are different. Mars's days are longer. It was based on a 24-hour cycle. All the laws of Torah were commanded when it comes to in relation to our experience on earth. If we leave earth, they're not applicable. And so based on that, he says if the question doesn't even start. Ilan Ramon, you asked me if I should, a blessed memory, you asked me, before you took off, you asked me if I should observe the commandments in outer space. No. Why? Because they're not applicable there. It's only upon the earth. Now, there was pushback to this, and I'm going to share that with you in a moment. One aspect of one question that one could ask is when we landed in outer space, we're really off the Earth, meaning we're still dependent on equipment from the Earth to keep us alive in outer space. So maybe we're not completely off the Earth. And that's what I believe Rav Goren said in his, Rabbi Goren was chief rabbi of Israel at one point. I think that's the point that he made, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there was some pushback to this. Rabbi Menachem Kasher was a huge rabbi, and he wrote this great work in Torah Shlema. His encyclopedic knowledge was incredible. So he immediately was like, what are you talking about, Rabbi Fur? He didn't say it like that, but he said, of course the commandments apply in outer space. Why would they not apply? And he uses this definition, which I think is important for where I want to take us in terms of the crux of their debate, which I think is deeper than what meets the eye. He says, and this is his text here, he says, the obligation to perform commandments rests upon each individual. It's a chiyuv gavra. Those who know that term know it, but basically the idea is that the commandments aren't related to the earth. They're related to the individual. They're not objectively connected to the earth. They're subjectively connected to the individual. They're connected to the human. Every Jew must keep the Torah wherever they live, up on the moon or in the water underground or at the North Pole, the South Pole, where a large part of the year remains light or dark, or in an airplane. There's no place where a Jew could become a zal for the Torah's mitzvot. I think a lot of people inherently feel this. I don't know, maybe you can offer in the chat section what you feel, but this approach resonates a little bit more with me, just for the reason I brought before. You're going to go up to outer space, all of a sudden you lose all your Yiddishkeit. You don't have to be a Jew anymore. It just doesn't resonate. All the discussions that how Judaism is here to help uplift and strengthen the individual and spiritualize their life don't make sense based on the first approach of Rav Ben-Zion Fear. And so that's how I like to explain this debate, conceptualizing the debate. Perhaps, and I'm not saying this is for sure what Rav Ben-Zion Fear was saying, or I do think this is what Rabbi Menachem Kasher was saying. Perhaps there's debate as to what is the purpose of the mitzvah. And this goes to a great general question. Is the purpose of the mitzvah, the commandments, to rectify the world? That's the picture on the left here. Is it all about tikkun olam? Is it about elevating this world? Is that the purpose of it? This world is incomplete. It needs repair. Especially, we all know this, our days, there's so much going on all around us that needs to be corrected. Torah was given for us to heal the world, fix it, and repair it, and make it better. Perhaps that's the purpose of the mitzvah. So when you go to outer space, it wouldn't be relevant because the purpose of the mitzvah were given for us to create and to heal the world. Perhaps there'll be some other Torah or some other direction that will be relevant for creating or doing tikkun yareach or tikkun ma'adim, not tikkun olam, fixing the moon or fixing Mars. But the Torah was given to fix this world. That's the function, the purpose of the mitzvah, to fix this world. Rabbi Menachem Kasher says, not so quickly. That's the picture on the right side. It's not necessarily about the world. It's about the human who's living in the world. The world was given to us to help us elevate ourselves. The purpose of the mitzvot, the commandments, is to fix us as humans. So no matter where you are, on earth, in outer space, you still have to be a Yid. You still have to be a Jew. Because the Torah's commandments, their purpose is to elevate the individual. Now, if you ask me who's correct, I think they're both true, obviously. I think the purpose of Judaism is to elevate the individual. But if the individual only focuses on themselves and elevating themselves, they've missed everything. Because we are here to help elevate the world, fix the world, and make it a better place for Jews, non-Jews, animals, and whoever needs our help. So I think really these two functions are really important and elemental in Judaism. And so they're both worth highlighting. But these are really two tracks, and with this I'll conclude this discussion, but two tracks, when you go through, you scan Jewish texts throughout all the generations, you have two tracks really. You have one that says this world is like a lobby to the next world, the world to come, which is the banquet hall. So prepare yourself in this world, elevate yourself as an individual so you can get to the next world, prepare yourself and become more spiritual. That's the approach, and you see that all over Jewish texts, even in Chapters of the Fathers, it's a basic Jewish text. It talks about elevating ourselves as individuals. That's the second approach. But if you go through Jewish texts, you'll find a lot of time that they also talk about the function, not about the individual, preparing yourself for the next world, the focus is this world. And a lot of denominations, oftentimes to the left of Orthodoxy, focus on that a lot. Rightfully so. It's such an important concept of elevating, fixing this world. And really, all throughout Jewish text, you'll find those two streams of thought. So I thought it was interesting to see them highlighted perhaps highlighted in this debate between those two huge rabbis. So we're going to continue on with the approach that says they are relevant in outer space. They might not be from the Torah, maybe rabbinically, but they are applicable in outer space. And then we're going to ask how to do it, how to perform them in outer space. So I'll just pause here if there's anything, Trillium, people are asking at this point.
I think on the Q&A, I don't think there's anything coming so far. Questions that relate to that section. So I think you are good to keep going. Thank you.
All right. So here's the last piece, and this is actually a really fascinating discussion here. And I'm going to show you a little video here. So let me just share my screen. All right. So let's say we do accept that mitzvah can be observed in outer space. How do we do it? Here's the problem. You ready for takeoff? Who's ready for takeoff? This is a depiction of 4 hours on a space station. 3 sunrises and 2 sunsets. This is the problem I raised in the beginning. This is just what it looks like in outer space. I'm going to turn on the volume just to improve the video quality. But you're on a this is sped up, obviously. But this is what it looks like if you're in space. You have a sunrise, and this is all in 90 minutes, a sunrise and a sunset. You're orbiting Earth because that's the nature of flight in outer space. You're orbiting, and you're going to come across it's light, and it's going to be dark, and then light, and then dark. So you get a feel for that just a little bit here. So let's say you're on a plane. You're on a space shuttle, and every 90 minutes you go through this. You could go crazy. You have to put on tefillin if you're a man according to strict Jewish law. You have to put on tefillin every time it becomes light outside. So every interval of 90 minutes you have to put on tefillin once. You're going to go crazy putting on tefillin in the phylacteries all the time. You have to pray multiple times, 3 times every 90 minutes. You're going to be like a praying machine. So obviously, this is a real question. Ilan Ramon went to the moon. He took off. Sorry to go to the moon. He took off in outer space, and he wanted to know, what do I do? I know that we observe law based on sunrise and sunset, but what do I do practically? He asked rabbis, and he received answers. So I'm going to provide some of those answers to you. The rabbis were perplexed because they said, this is not a normal case. So they had to seek precedent within Jewish law for dealing with this. And so they went to a case that is a unique case in Jewish law with unique situation when it comes to sunrise and sunset. That's areas in the polar regions that see light. There could be an area that could see light it'll be light outside for 50 days in a row. Be light outside for 50 days in a row. So how do they observe the commandments? They must have laws. There's Jews there or near there. What do they do? And the rabbi of Halperin, who we're going to present his halachic ruling, Jewish law ruling on this. He went to that place to try to figure out how to answer Ilan Ramon's question when it comes to going outer space. He went to the halachic precedent of Jewish observance in the polar regions in order to answer it. So I just want to share with you what that looks like. So here's just him, Rav Levi Yitzhak Halperin, articulating the problem. You want at least 2 Shabbos every 24-hour period, each one 1/2 an hour long. So you got the problem. So here's the situation. There's certain areas like Sweden, for instance. Northern Sweden, it'll be light there for 50 days in a row. And it'll be dark there for extended periods of time without sunrise and sunset. So how they observe Torah in those places without a sunrise and a sunset. Here's a depiction of how this all works, but I literally have a short amount of time, so I'm not going to give you a science lesson, but trust me that this is the case, and if you don't know, ask somebody or look it up. So Rav Moshe Sternbuch basically says, listen, it's a problem. He says it's a problem. He says, and he basically says like this, and we don't have to read it inside, but he basically says, it's not day there, it's not night there. So you know what? You shouldn't go there. That's his solution to that. And he's one of our huge authorities, and there's definitely some validity to that argument where he's basically saying it's a place where there's a lot of doubts when it comes to Jewish law. So try to stay away from there if you can. However, Ilan Ramon wasn't asking if you should go to space. He's going to space. So now what do you do? What does he do? So we're going back to this case of the Arctic regions where there's extended periods of sunrise and sunset, and we don't have the normal case. So what do we do? And from there, we're going to extrapolate to our case. So I have another approach, which I saw this in an article by Rabbi Blech, but it's not. No one actually upholds this approach, but it's just an interesting approach. He says, perhaps you would just go. I could just explain this to you outside of it. I'll read it to you, actually. It says, there's another way of viewing the passing of days at the poles. Method that's simple and obvious in conception, but entirely strange in application. There is strong reason to assume that the halachic days are demarcated by sunrise and sunset. There is no obvious reason for assuming that a day must be approximately 24 hours in duration. If so, it might readily argue that a day should be always defined as the period that elapses between one sunset and the next sunset, regardless of how many hours have elapsed between those two phenomena. I'll explain what that means. Let's say you get into outer space. You leave, Ilan Ramon takes off on a Tuesday, enters into outer space. Where he goes, one enters into the pole, one enters into northern Sweden on a Tuesday, and it's light outside. And it doesn't get dark. Perhaps that Tuesday would extend for 50 days straight. So perhaps the day in outer space would extend. Perhaps the day in outer space would be based on every sunrise and sunset. So that would get really complicated, and you would go crazy. So we wouldn't go by intervals of 24 hours. We would go by the sunrise and sunset. You would go crazy. So that's not applicable either. So what do we do? Here's an approach that is widely accepted. This is what Rav Levi Yitzhak Halperin suggested to Ilan Ramon. And this is based, and there's a few different articulations of this. But this is based on the Tiferet Israel. Tiferet Israel. And he basically says, I'll just read the first paragraph to you. And the second paragraph kind of brings in some difficulties that people raise with his explanation. But he basically says, we go by the location from which you departed. So let's say somebody left an area that had a normal sunrise and sunset, and they went into the Arctic region. So he basically says this, let's read this to you. Without citing evidence or precedent for his view, the Tiferet Yisrael opines that the travel would adopt the clock of the place from which he departed and determine the beginning and end of each day and the various divisions thereof. So he basically says that I would go by the place from which he departed. So let's say you went into the Arctic region where you're going to northern Sweden where it's light it's about to be light for 50 days in a row. You left from a place that had a normal sunrise and sunset. You base your days and you count them based on that. You go based on the sunrise and sunset of the most local place from which you left, the place from which you departed, that had a normal sunrise and sunset. You just base your count on that. So if you left on a Tuesday there, 24 hours later it'll be Wednesday, even though it was light outside. And 24 hours later it'll be Thursday, even though it's completely light outside. We just go by 24-hour intervals based on the place from which you departed. And that's what Rav Levi Yitzhak Halperin answered to Ilan Ramon. He basically said that he would go by the location from which he departed, because the sunrise and sunset is so unpredictable. It happens so often. We can't go by the sunrise and sunset. And he's not asking if you should go or not. He's going. So now, what do you do? So this is what he said. You should go by a place from which you departed. Where's that place? Cape Canaveral. You go by that location. So you left there. You left there on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 p.m. Count your time from then. So you left there, let's say you left there on a Wednesday at 4 p.m. 24 hours later, it'll be Friday, 4 p.m. 24 hours later, it'll be Shabbos, 4 p.m. And you would observe Jewish law like that. He happened to tell, technically, Ilan Ramon wanted to go by Israel time, and he allowed him to do that in the end. But in principle, the Jewish law would suggest going by the place from which you departed. So to sum everything up, we have a lot of interesting questions that come up when it comes to going to outer space. First is, how do you define food? How do you define food? Food that's brought into outer space is take on the definition of outer space. And what if you found food in outer space? Well, what blessings do we need to go over that? That leads us to really the two other topics, which is how you define what a human is, and the second question, the last piece to discuss is observing Jewish law in outer space. How do you define a human? If an alien wants to convert, which sounds like a funny question, but it actually gets to a really deep question. Who am I? Who am I as a human? What makes me unique in comparison to animals or any other creatures? Is it my faculty of speech? Is it the fact that I was born from a woman or a human? Is it some other definition? It's deep discussion. And my feeling is that it's probably a combination of a lot of those together. Lastly is, how do you observe Jewish law in outer space? Do the commandments, what's their function? Is the function of the commandments? It's a huge question. Is it to elevate us as individuals? Or is it to elevate the world? Whatever your answer is, that's going to be your main focus. That might influence the whole way you lead your life. So it's really important to have the answer to that. I believe it's a combination of both of them for sure. And the truth is, whatever denomination you are, they might highlight one more than the other. Lastly is, how do you observe Jewish law in outer space? It will go by the location from which you left. At least by Rav Levi Yitzhak Halperin's Jewish law ruling, or go by land of Israel. And that's also an important piece. This whole discussion of Ilan Ramon seeking out how to observe the commandments wherever he is. I think there's a really important element here. He was leaving the Earth's stratosphere. He's going to an unknown place. But he wanted to hold on to the commandments, the word of God, and the mitzvahs. He wanted to hold on to them. And I think that's something a very powerful message we can take for us today. There's so much chaos going on all around us on multiple fronts. One thing that Jewish people have and that the whole world has is the word of God. And there are ways for non-Jews to observe certain commandments and attach themselves to the Torah. We have the word of God, we have the Torah, and just like Ilan Ramon wanted to hold on to as much as he could no matter where he went, I think that if we do that, we also will feel the strength of connection to God no matter where we are, and we'll always stay plugged in and connected to God. I think that's like the message of this whole seeking of observing Torah in outer space. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have quite a lot of questions. As a reminder, if anyone in the audience currently has a question, please pop that into the Q&A for me. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat as well, but I'll go first to the Q&As. If you are joining us from Facebook, please pop your question into the comment section, and Laura, our colleague, will make sure they make it over to us here. So I think given where we landed... I
like that, where we landed.
Right. I think there's one quick question that I think it's worth answering straight away. In outer space, do you still face Israel to pray? And how?
Yeah.
Because you're moving at a speed, right? So how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, in Jewish law, it says even in like the earlier texts, if you can't figure out, if you don't know where Jerusalem is, you face your heart to the temple. So you kind of like you have your intention towards Jerusalem, towards the temple. So that's what you would do. The whole purpose of pointing your body is so that you can point your soul and your intention towards Jerusalem. So if you don't have the ability to focus and point your body towards Jerusalem, it will get kind of complicated because you're constantly probably turning around or whatever. But basically, you put your heart and soul and you focus on Jerusalem.
Thank you. Okay, next question that kind of intrigued me as well. So, assuming this were biologically possible, which is assuming a chunk, what about an individual who is biologically half human and half alien? Where do they fall into the conversation about being able to be Jewish?
That's such an interesting question because there's in the Jerusalem Talmud, Nida 31. I don't remember all the sources. I've read this before in a lecture. It talks about a case where you have a creature that looks half human and half animal, and asks how you define it. And it goes into definitions. What if you go by its appearance? In the end, it kind of talks about how it functions. Does it learn Torah or not? Does it do human things? So perhaps that discussion would be relevant for this text, or that discussion relevant for this discussion, kind of going by maybe appearance, going by how they function. Do they function like humans? Maybe that would be important. It talks about like if they learn Torah, or and they say like if that individual is half animal, half human, would lead you, would be with you out in the fields. Would you wouldn't slaughter it because it has human qualities. So. And it talks about like in terms of their occupation. So maybe that would be a way to go about dealing with that.
That's an interesting take on it.
Yeah.
Maybe eventually we'll find out. So I think one of the things that seems to have really intrigued a lot of people was when you were speaking earlier about to be a human, you need to communicate through speech. And a lot of people were really wanted to dig into if that is not the way in which as a human you communicate, but you are of course still a human. What happens there?
Somebody who can't speak.
Yeah, so Helen Keller was used as an example. So someone who can still totally communicate, but not in speech in the same way that you and I are talking right now.
Yeah, so it's either like speech in actuality or potential. So as a human, in their definition of themselves as a human, they have that capacity to speak. They might not themselves be able to do so, but usually it's understood that like inherently they have that capacity. It can be like a circular thing because like you could say that an alien or robot or something has capacity to speak, but they're not speaking. Or maybe that golem had capacity to speak. I mean, one of the sages, one of the sources we talked about said there's different types of golems. Some can speak, some can't. So maybe a golem in potential can speak. So why would Rava have killed the golem? I don't know, but like usually that's how it is. Like in humans in potential can speak, and that's what sets them apart. But again, human speech, maybe this answers a little bit more also. Human speech is a combination of a few aspects. There's a certain intellect that goes into the communication and speech, and humans also stand out in that sense. So it's not one faculty exclusively. It's speech that is articulated through intellect and also through volition, free will. So it's oftentimes a combination of those pieces. So Helen Keller or anybody else who's communicating in a volitional and intelligent way, they're definitely bringing out their humanness based on that. And again, I would add on perhaps they have the potential to speak as humans.
Right. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Okay, somebody's asked, how do you observe the new moon if you're on the moon?
That is a great question. Okay, so there is a Jewish law talks about every month when observant Jews observe the new moon, they make a blessing over it and thank God for the new moon. So how do you do so when you're on the moon? Is there a law? Is that law applicable when you're on the moon? So in those prayers, we talk about Another question that was asked is, in those, when we're saying those prayers, there's a verse that says, just like I'm dancing in front of you, the moon, and I can't touch you, so too, none of my foes will be able to touch me. So if you're on the moon, it would be false to say that statement, because you are on the moon, you're touching the moon. So maybe you'll omit that statement, but a deeper piece to that is that maybe you're not completely on the moon. Meaning you're not completely on the moon in the sense that you haven't landed, you're in spacesuits and whatnot. So maybe there is still place to make a blessing over the moon in that sense. But on the other hand, I have to think about that a little bit more, because the problem will be is that we bless over the moon when we view it in Earth as being waning, as being completely a new moon. So perhaps you wouldn't make the blessing. I have to think about that a little bit more. That's a good question.
That's an interesting question, definitely. See, I think might have answered most of the questions that we've got here. I see a few of them that have come in. And just to make everybody aware, we have recorded the presentation this evening. And you will be able to view that either on our website from early next week, or you can actually go ahead and have a little look at the recording on Facebook from this evening. Let's see, just give it one more second to see if we get any additional questions coming in.
And one thing I'll add, the museum is doing a great job of bringing in really fascinating speakers and presentations in their exhibition. It's really worth checking out. It's a really interesting topic. If this piqued your interest, there's so much more to find out. So make sure to stay involved, like them on Facebook, follow them. They have a lot of really important material to share with you, and really fascinating discussions and information. So.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi. You're doing my job now for me, so thank you so much. No, it's brilliant. So it doesn't look like we've got any other questions come in. Just following up to what the Rabbi said there, I popped in the chat box for everybody the registration link for our program next week, which really is a sneak peek into the exhibit. That's Tuesday at 7 p.m. There is also a link to the Rabbi's presentation from last week, so you can see the full recording there. And then there is also the materials that the Rabbi mentioned at the opening of the program, so you can go back and have a little look at some of the source materials. That link is there for you as well. So I think with that, I would just like to say thank you so much, Rabbi, for joining us for both of these brilliant programs. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining us this evening, and hopefully we will get a chance to see you at the exhibit when we open up in September. So thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.